2020 was a year that will forever be remembered as one of the oddest and ultimately one of the most interesting spells in the UFC's short lifespan. After the COVID-19 pandemic brought the sporting world to a halt, it was Dana White and the UFC who managed to power on through, bringing fights to the fans with only a short break to reassess. With that move came a number of hugely memorable contests, ones that birthed several new stars and standouts who rose to the occasion to take advantage of the increased pressure that came with a year like the one we just saw. So with that in mind, we're going to take a look at the 10 most impressive fighters of 2020, those athletes who stood out amongst the rest for their performances inside the cage last year. These rankings are based purely on the form, performances, and calibre of opposition faced and defeated by these guys over the last 365-day period. With that out of the way, here's our list. To kick things off, we have the man who in many ways was the breakout star of the year as a whole. Indeed, Khamzat Chimaev is still waiting for the bigger tests, but as far as making your mark goes, no single fighter has elevated their stock to a greater extent than this hugely talented welterweight and middleweight prospect. Now a very real draw for the company, despite not yet being tested on the pay-per-view circuit, the numbers don't lie with Khamzat Chimaev, and with 3 near-perfect finish victories across 2 different weight classes, it's pretty clear that we're looking at a future contender with this guy. And while his arranged clash with Leon Edwards may never come to fruition, based on what we know about the UFC and their practices, Dana and his team will no doubt be looking to give Khamzat a top 10 test in his next outing. And when you consider how meteoric his rise was last year, who can blame them? Next up, we have the former UFC middleweight champion Robert Whittaker, who managed to go 2-0 in the year 2020 with a pair of victories over Darren Till and Jared Cannonier. It is difficult being the second best in a division beneath a king as masterful as Israel Adesanya, but for me, the way in which Whittaker has managed to rebound from his crushing loss to the champion has been very impressive. Till and Cannonier were the type of opponents who, in many ways, looked primed to make a major leap into title contention with a victory over the Reaper. And yet, despite his wars with Yoel Romero and his muted performance against Stylebender, did a good job at reminding us all of why he is one of the greatest middleweights of his era. Whether he can get his revenge on the champion is anyone's guess, but with Adesanya now looking at 205 pounds, who knows how the landscape of the 185-pound division will look this year. But if one thing's for certain, it's that Robert Whittaker will be right in the thick of the action. Valentina Shevchenko! Valentina Shevchenko is without an equal within the 125-pound weight class. Indeed, her pair of closely fought losses to the bantamweight and featherweight queen Amanda Nunes hang over her head, but all in all, with her now fighting at her own natural weight, the Bullet's progress on a technical level has been astounding. I think it's fair to say that the fighter who narrowly lost out to Nunes back in 2017 would be no match for the version of Shevchenko who defeated both Jennifer Maia and Caitlin Chookagian last year, with the contenders at flyweight being knocked down as quickly as they're lined up. Perhaps a deserved trilogy bout with the Lioness will be on the cards this year. If it does come to pass, you do get the impression that this would be Nunes' toughest challenge to date, right? Kevin Trailblazer Holland! Kevin Holland last year had one of the most ridiculous schedules you could ever imagine for an MMA fighter at the top flight. 5 fights and 5 victories in the space of 7 months was enough to make Holland one of the standout stars of the lockdown period. And while his first 4 were impressive, it was his stunning knockout of Ronaldo Jacare Souza that served up his standout moment. Catching the famed Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioner with strikes from his back, oddly enough, Holland was able to score a finish that began from what should have been a nervy position for him. It's that explosiveness, that power, that athleticism, those are the traits that defined Kevin Holland's best moments this year, and as far as I'm concerned, as a result of his electric style and his willingness to compete, he should be given a top 5 test for his next Octagon outing. Next up, of course we're going to give the champion of the middleweight division some recognition. Indeed, the fight with Yoel Romero was something of a dud in the eyes of the sports fan base, but even with that being the case, going 2-0 as a champion with a pair of wins that saw him take very little damage is quite impressive. As Adesanya masterfully disposed of Paulo Costa, he made the levels that exist between him and the rest of the 185-pound crop quite clear, and while we certainly would have liked to have seen a more animated showcase between himself and the legendary Romero, for a lot of fans in hindsight, That stylistic clash was in many ways doomed to fail. With his eyes now firmly fixed on the 205-pound belt, perhaps Adesanya's days at middleweight are through, but overall, I got the sense that after his rapid rise through 2019, 2020 served as the year that would see him lay down the foundations for his shot at pound-for-pound greatness. With that now out of the way, let's just see how far up that list Israel Adesanya can make it. If I may call this video to a halt for a moment, to all of our regular viewers over the last few weeks, you'll know the drill at this point, but we're really trying to up our game here at MMA Dive in order to bring you even more content this year. So if you're really enjoying what we're doing so far, be sure to leave a comment and a like to let YouTube's algorithms know that we're fast becoming one of the best MMA channels on the platform. Obviously, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do so now to stay up to date with all of our latest uploads. Okay, back to the matter at hand.
Khabib! The Eagle Nurmagomedov!
Just one fight for Khabib Nurmagomedov, and yet we're here talking about him as the 5th most impressive fighter of the year. Well, despite his inactivity, level of competition counts for something, and in Justin Gaethje, Nurmagomedov was taking on the most impressive contender in the best division in the sport. The manner in which he managed to find the second round submission in that bout was nothing short of masterful. Khabib is just on another level, and while I don't fully buy his retirement for obvious reasons, 2020 in many ways was the year that the Eagle started to get the type of recognition he deserves. The type of recognition that brings his name into those overarching conversations around GOATs and all-time greats. If 29-0 is all we get, then it's a fair way to go out. But as far as I'm concerned, I would be very surprised if we didn't see him back in action for one final outing. Everyone who was anticipating high-level grappling warfare between Gilbert Burns and Demian Maia were probably left disappointed to some extent, as Burns managed to score a brutal first-round KO to close the show. That win stood as the perfect indicator of the progression of Burns' overall game. No longer a meandering lightweight with all the potential in the world, Durinho well and truly arrived at 170 pounds in 2020, furthering his stock within the division with a hugely dominant victory over Tyron Woodley soon after. As a veteran of the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu circuit, Gilbert had been hyped up for years, but with his added physicality and his maturation into this new weight class, we're finally seeing this man as the potential champion he could be. Whether he can get past the similarly great Kamaru Usman is anyone's guess, but Gilbert Burns is certainly knocking on the door. If this was a list that compiled the year's biggest surprise packages, let me tell you now that Jan Blachowicz would run away with the victory. Who could have predicted the run of form this Polish standout would eventually hit within the 205-pound division? Besting both Dominic Reyes and Corey Anderson by way of stoppage, Blachowicz found his way to the top of the mountain in the absence of the division's undefeated King John Jones, boasting a skill set that is clearly still improving. With his veteran savvy and that trademark Polish power, if Blachowicz can manage to get a victory over the rising middleweight champion Israel Adesanya, it's crazy to think that 2021 could be an even better year for this late bloomer. Just missing out on the top spot is the newest star of the lightweight division, Charles Oliveira. Anyone who has followed the sport over the last decade or so would have no doubt firmly pigeonholed this hugely talented athlete as something of a loose cannon. Fighting primarily at featherweight, Oliveira was always seen as dangerous but unreliable in tense situations. He would make mistakes that often proved costly, and while he certainly found some impressive form upon moving up to 155 pounds, even then we thought we knew who this guy was. Jump forward to the beginning of 2021, and we're looking at the guy who could very well be the best active lightweight contender on the planet. That victory over Tony Ferguson was impressive beyond belief, and now, despite the sharks that circle around the somewhat murky waters of the title picture, it could well be said that Do Bronx is the most deserving challenger of them all. And finally, the winner, the fighter that has enjoyed the best year of any fighter within the UFC, the flyweight king himself, Deiveson Figueiredo. The flyweight division was indeed saved by Henry Cejudo, but in his absence, it has without question been the work of Figueiredo that has all of a sudden made it an attraction. Sure, it's not quite an A-list tier division yet, but with his complete and utter drubbings of Joseph Benavidez, his rapid submission of Alex Perez, and of course his instant classic battle against Brandon Moreno, Deiveson Figueiredo grabbed the year 2020 by the unmentionable tables and made it his own. A truly impressive effort from the king of a division that many fans had unfortunately given up on. A worthy winner to our list, and another fighter who is setting up to build on his successes this year. As you would expect, there were a lot of hugely talented fighters who missed out on a spot on this list. Our honourable mentions go to Curtis Blades, Calvin Kattar, Brandon Moreno, Neil Magny, Chris Cyborg, Glover Teixeira, Alistair Overeem, Marvin Vettori, Mackenzie Dern, and Weili Zhang. With those deserving honourable mentions out of the way, that will just about do it for this list. How do you think we did in our assessment of the year 2020? Did we forget any obvious picks? Do let us know in the comment section below, we really love to hear from you guys. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like before subscribing to the channel to stay up to date with all of our latest uploads. And as always, thank you for watching.